This is my way too early 2018 NFL predictions. These are the teams that I believe will make the playoffs next year. So why do this in February? Why is it the middle of February and we're already talking about this? Here's why. I am curious how this will change over the course of the offseason. So like by August, are we going to have a completely different perspective? Are we going to say, oh, wow, I can't believe we thought that team was going to be in the playoffs? Or are we going to say, oh, wow, I can't believe we didn't realize that team was going to be in the playoffs? It's fun now to get a gauge so we can look back on later. These are the teams I think will make the playoffs in the NFC. You have the Rams. I think the Rams are poised to go back. The Rams have Sean McVay. They're in their second year with Jared Goff playing really well. I believe in the Rams. I think the Rams will make the playoffs. I also think the 49ers are going to make the playoffs. The 49ers have a great young coach, great general manager, an owner that seems to believe in them and is giving them patience. And you got, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo, my favorite quarterback in the NFL. I think he's fantastic. I love watching him. And I think the 49ers are on the up and up and absolutely will make the playoffs next year. Next, you have the Green Bay Packers. Packers are interesting because they have Aaron Rodgers. And again, the question is, how far can Aaron Rodgers carry them? You also have the Vikings in their division and the Lions. I think the Vikings are out. They're going to have a really tough really tough schedule because they have a first-place schedule. And they're going to be kind of hungover. They had a great year last year. And it's when you have a year like that, often with young teams that haven't been there before, you see a drop-off, like the Falcons had last year. Or the Seahawks 2 years ago. It's just what happens. You see teams reach such high highs, and if they aren't used to it, they go back down to low lows. I think the Vikings are not going to be in the playoffs. They also don't know who their quarterback is. The Lions are not going to make the playoffs either. Remember how competitive the NFC is. So my teams I'm choosing are the Packers, the Saints, the Eagles, the Cowboys, the 49ers, and the Rams. And there are a couple other teams that are really fantastic in the NFC. I think the Lions are sadly the odd man out. The Lions, the Seahawks are not going to make the playoffs, and the Falcons will not make the playoffs. So why do I believe the Saints are in the playoffs? First of all, I think the Saints are going to be one of those teams that has their head down and just gut it out through all year because they're ready for the playoffs. The Saints should have made it farther in the playoffs this last year. I think we're going to see a very serious professional team in the Saints that just week to week got their head down, bam, 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 methodically moving through the season, trying to get to the NFL playoffs and ultimately a Super Bowl. And the Eagles are interesting. The Eagles are going to have a first-place schedule, but they also have MVP candidate Carson Wentz coming back. And I think that's the difference. Even though you're going to have a tougher schedule, you're also going to have Carson Wentz back, which offsets the difference. And the Cowboys are the team I'm choosing to be in the last playoff spot. The Cowboys will make the wild card spot, in my opinion. They have an easier schedule than last year. They'll have Ezekiel Elliott all season, and I think Dak Prescott's going to make another step forward. I really do. I believe in Dak Prescott. I think he's awesome, and I like him as a leader. I really like Dak Prescott. So the teams that are not in the playoffs. So the teams in the playoffs, the Rams, the 49ers, the Packers, the Saints, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. I explained why I think the Vikings are not going to make the playoffs. I think the Lions are also left out, but the Seahawks are in trouble. The Seahawks division got even better. The Rams are fantastic. The 49ers are fantastic. The Cardinals are a mess, but the Cardinals always seem to bring it to the Seahawks. The Seahawks are in trouble, man. Russell Wilson seems like he wants more money. There's a rumor out there that that's the case. Your aging stars, and they're not looking any younger. Richard Sherman doesn't look younger. The guys you have on defense want to get paid the money they're getting paid, but they also aren't playing the same level. So I would trade them. They have a lot of decisions to make this offseason. Seahawks are interesting, and I think the Seahawks are going to make it to the playoffs because of how competitive the NFC is. And the Falcons. The Falcons lost the Super Bowl last year, and they were kind of hungover. So this year they should be back, but because of how competitive the NFC is, I'm just not seeing the Falcons making the playoffs next year. I'd love to be wrong. It's possible, but I think Kyle Shanahan was really special for them, and without him, they're still really going to struggle. Now, who are going to make the playoffs in the AFC? Yeah, the Patriots. I think the Patriots are going to be back with a vengeance. Their division is still incredibly easy, and there's no one really to challenge them in the AFC. I think the Patriots are back in the playoffs next season. The Steelers are back, then their division is pretty weak. The Ravens are okay. The Bengals, I have no faith in the Bengals or Andy Dalton. The Browns are the Browns. I think the Steelers are back in the playoffs next season. Now, I'm making an interesting decision in the AFC South. I'm picking the Texans to make the playoffs instead of the Jaguars. I think the AFC is a lot more competitive than it's been in the past. So I think the Texans, Deshaun Watson's back. Deshaun Watson should have been the rookie of the year this year. Deshaun Watson's going to be incredible. And the Texans have a great roster. I think the Texans have an easier schedule than the Jaguars, and they will make the playoffs next year. Now, the AFC West is incredibly competitive. This is why I made a tough decision. I said, who's going to make the playoffs? I don't know that the Jaguars are in. I think the Jaguars, that's the one I feel the least confident in. But it's because of how incredibly good the AFC West is. The AFC West has the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. The Chiefs just brought in Patrick Mahomes to be their starter. Well, they didn't bring him in, but they've committed, it seems like, to Patrick Mahomes being their starter. I think that elevates the Chiefs to being a playoff team. Well, they're already a playoff team, but this just keeps them going. I think the Chiefs are even better than they were last year because of the quarterback change. Now, the Raiders have Derek Carr and John Gruden. I think John Gruden significantly elevates Derek Carr and is why I believe the Raiders will be in the playoffs next season. Now, again, it came down to the Broncos or the Jaguars, and it was a really tough call. The Broncos' playoff chances are all predicated on who their quarterback is. If the Broncos can get Kirk Cousins in this year's offseason, then I'm placing a bet that the Broncos will be in the. I'm not actually placing a bet, but I would bet you anything the Broncos make the playoffs. Because Kirk Cousins is the difference. If the Broncos, who have a great roster, can get Kirk Cousins, that's the difference right there. They're in the playoffs. But if they have a rookie quarterback, if they pick Josh Allen or Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold, I don't know who they're going to pick. But if they have to pick a rookie quarterback, I'm not as convinced they're in the playoffs. They are a quarterback away, but then they're 2 years away with a rookie. And again, the Jaguars are the team I'm the most torn about. Because I do think they're incredibly talented, but the quarterback scares me. I want to see what Blake Bortles is made of. Does he come back even better than last year? Is he the guy we saw against the Patriots? Or is he the guy we saw struggle earlier last year? I don't know. I really don't. And remember, the Texans are in the division. The Texans, the Colts are there. I think the Colts are still a year away. I like their head coach. I like Frank Reich. I don't know what the deal is with Andrew Luck, but I'm curious. But I think the Jaguars are out of the playoffs. And then the Ravens. I left the Ravens out. Remember, they were a play away. They were a fluke play at the end of their season from making the playoffs. And yet they had an ordeal recently where they said they were considering firing their head coach. And I think anytime you have a culture where you're already talking about firing your head coach, it's a problem. I think the Ravens might be a toxic environment. I'm concerned about that. I think the Ravens could be back. It's very possible. They're on the bubble, similar to the Jaguars. But you're talking about firing your head coach when you just barely miss the playoffs. It's kind of weird. I don't understand that. So I'm very curious. Remember, I have no idea what's going to happen. But I'm curious to see what changes between now and August. I'm going to revisit this in August and say, these are the teams I picked to make the playoffs. Do I still feel that way? I think that's interesting to me, and I'm very excited. Help me grow Strong Opinion Sports by telling your friends about this podcast. Share it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Copy the link. Share it on Reddit maybe. I don't understand Reddit. And if you really like this podcast, if you love this podcast as much as I do, remember that you can subscribe to Strong Opinion Sports on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on YouTube, and on Google Play. Spotify coming very soon. Thank you so much and have a great day.